Everyone, thank you so much for being here today. I'm Maddy Martin. I'm the head of growth and education for Smith.ai. We are a 24/7 virtual receptionist and intake service. We do answering, scheduling, intake, and payments for solo and small firm attorneys and many other service businesses, which we will be talking about LinkedIn strategies for tomorrow. So if you haven't signed up for that, please do. But today's topic is focused on the do's and don'ts of paid consultations for attorneys. So if you're not an attorney, you're sure to get a lot of value out of this, but specifically for attorneys, we know that it's a real pain point to figure out what is your approach, strategy, tactics, reasoning behind consultations and charging for them or not. So joining me today is Allison Williams of Law Firm Mentor and Dan Lear of Gravity Legal. I will let the two of them introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the meat of the discussion today, where we'll cover the ramifications of free consultations, how lawyers should charge for them, ways to elevate your firm and attract more clients through paid consultations, and then solutions built for attorneys to schedule and monetize those new client meetings. So Allison, please introduce yourself to the group today.
All right, so hi, for everyone who does not know me, my name is Allison Williams. I am known as the Law Firm Mentor, and my company, Law Firm Mentor, is a business coaching service for solo and small law firm attorneys. We help them to grow their revenues, crush chaos in business, and make more money. And in addition to lovely Law Firm Mentor, I also am the host of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, where I have wonderful hosts like Maddy and Dan, who have their own shows, but also have been invited onto my show to share with you strategies about optimization of your marketing, sales, people, and systems in law firms. So that's in a nutshell what we do here at Law Firm Mentor.
Wonderful. All right, Dan, let's hear from you.
Hey, everybody. I'm Dan Lear. I'm the head of marketing and partnerships at Gravity Legal. At Gravity Legal, we help small entrepreneurial, mission-driven, consumer-facing lawyers and law firms to ease the pain and burden of getting paid. I'm a former practicing licensed attorney here in Washington State in Seattle, and really excited to talk about this topic. I feel like it's a little more polarizing than most people might think. So I'm excited to sort of dig in with Maddy and Allison and talk a little bit more. And then I also, have a podcast as well. It's called Financially Legal. We talk about the economics of running a business, particularly obviously a law firm. Love to have you check it out and listen in.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you both for being here again, and thanks for explaining a little bit about your backgrounds, which are much richer and more in depth than we could get to on this webinar. But let's really get into it. So the do's and don'ts of paid consultations. I think that there are a lot of people here who haven't even dipped a toe into paid consultations, really wondering, is it for them? Is it possible to navigate those waters of paid consultations based on specific practice areas, and finding a reason to move forward with an approach for paid consultations, if you can find that it works for you, that just is in sync with your motivation, your motto, your lifeblood behind your firm. So what I mean by that is, sometimes there is a feeling with paid consultations, and there's a lot of controversy, I think, around them as a result of going to law school, not going to business school, not having any sales or marketing or funnel training, so to speak, for moving a new potential client through to a paid client. And as a result, there's just a lot of hidden optimizations that can be done, paid consultations being one of them, to help move the most qualified potential leads to the consultation stage and then to the new paying client stage. And what we see, just as some background here before we get started, is that there is hesitation because of a lack of business acumen, a lack of business training and confidence. We know from the Clio Legal Trends report that the vast majority, like 92% of attorneys, say that law school didn't prepare them for business school. 76% are already overworked. So coming up with a new plan and strategy for newly charging for consultation seems intimidating, not to mention the fact that, depending on the growth stage of the attorney at their law firm, there may not be an appetite for turning anyone away, even though we know that the majority of new potential clients who book a consultation do not end up hiring that attorney. Now, talk to Allison about her close rate, and you'll see a completely different, flipped on its head statistic, right? So what is it that actually allows you to have paid consultations and improve your close rate, not turn people away or turn people off because of your charging for consultations, but in fact, building confidence, building trust, building meaningful value and expectations properly set from the get-go? All of these things come into play in this discussion. So if you are here and you're of the mindset that it's not for you, or you tried it and it didn't work, it eliminated too many leads at the top of the marketing funnel, so to speak, you were uncomfortable and were waiving payments maybe that were due to you for those consultations when you tried to charge, there are so many ways that it can go wrong, but many more ways that it can go right. And that's why Allison and Dan are here today to talk about what not to do, what to lean into and do more of. And we're going to go through a lot of the nitty gritty here. So I hope that so far this is resonating and there are pain points that we will solve for you. Please add your questions so that we know, are we meeting your needs with this presentation today? We would love to be hearing from you throughout, and I will do my best to present those questions at the right time to Allison and Dan. So first I'm going to go to Allison and really want to get into the discussion to talk about how we think about paid consultations for law firms and how to align this strategy, this tactic with your firm's goals, with your workflows so that it's operational, it's not just fiscally desirable, and how to even involve A/B testing, which is something that Allison really talks a lot about, and understanding which iteration is best for your clients and your firm. So Allison, do you want to talk a little bit big picture first about aligning your consultation strategy with your firm's goals and why that's important?
Yeah, so that's such a great frame for where I think we need to start with this conversation, which is the one area that I know lawyers are most resistant. So we always start with the pain point, right? So the thing that everyone has to understand about consultations is that when you are offering someone a consultation on the phone, when you go through your intake process, that is a sales process. Even if you don't think of yourself as a salesperson, even if you don't consider yourself trying to promote the idea of selling something to a person you're trying to help, you're trying to serve, you're a professional, ultimately you are having a conversation with a person in order to reach a point where you exchange economic value for the work that you're going to do for them. So you are engaged in a sales process. And if you don't approach the entirety of your intake process as a sales process, if you don't build in the things that people need in order to reach a conclusion on their own, that they are in fact going to hire you, not because you have convinced them or pushed them or persuaded them even, but because you have engaged them in the type of analytical process that got them into the emotional energy and the analytical thought frame where they made that decision on their own, you are taking a crapshoot for every person that calls your office. It's not that you can't get on the phone, do a name, rank, serial number. Hey, who are you? What's your name? What's your email? You want to come in for this type of consult? Give me the facts. Sure, let's book you for Tuesday, and I'm charging you X dollars. you can absolutely get people to hire you or to buy your consult when you do that. However, that is because they have already made up their mind before you got there. So that means typically your marketing is exceptional. It means they were personally referred to you. So John Doe comes in and is like, you know, I was referred to you by my next door neighbor who says you were the best criminal defense lawyer in the world, and I am now committing the same crimes as my neighbor. Or I need a divorce, and my next door neighbor's wife came over and she divorced him because she and I had a thing going. So now I want a divorce too. You know, however you got there, those are the types of relationships that will likely lead you to, you know, having someone hire you. But if you're talking about what we would refer to as cold traffic, people who don't have a relationship with you or someone in close nexus to you when they come to you, what really will get them to a place of making that decision is having a sales conversation. And that isn't as intimidating as lawyers think that it is. It is about asking questions far more than giving information. It is about asking questions to seek out what is urgent to that person. And once you learn what is urgent to that person, the goal is then to offer them the solution to their urgency. And in an intake process, that really is scheduling the consultation, right? So I called with a problem. I'm telling you about the problem. And now I'm telling you why the problem matters to me. And as soon as we hit that point, you get that information, you offer them the solution. That's when they're primed to buy the solution, that is scheduling an appointment. If you don't approach it that way, again, you're leaving opportunities on the table. So for newer law firm owners, people that are a little bit more economically distressed, like, oh my God, I don't want to turn anyone away, I think you have to really ask yourself, not just what is the likelihood of me getting this person, but what is the system for how I'm going to approach all of my intake calls? Because systems create freedom, right? They create continuity, predictability, reliability. And if you take one person as a one-off and say, I'm going to do it the old way of name, rank, serial number, appointment, and charge, or name, rank, serial number, appointment, and no charge, you have the opportunity that is less statistically less likely to lead a person to a yes than if you were to ultimately engage in a true sales process. So I always recommend that people do that as opposed to kind of the I'm desperate, let me try to get the person in, and free gets them in, even though we also know that that also has the highest no-show rate. So it actually doesn't tend to get them in as much as we might think it does, but it does ultimately get some people in.
So Allison, I mean, those are such great points. And I think just to touch on for a second, being proactive, knowing the questions that you need to ask to just determine, are they a good fit for your firm? Depending on sort of the accelerated growth that you're planning, the growth stage that you're in, are you new? Are you refining? Are you turning more people away? No matter what growth stage you're in, there are a few statistics that I want you to be mindful of for everyone listening here before we move forward. Allison has hit the nail on the head. You need to proactively ask questions. Now, that will also lead you to proactively share information and not just ask questions. You want to set the stage and the boundaries. You want to lead that conversation, because guess what? You are leading that conversation every step moving forward. During this conversation, if you let them railroad, tell their entire life story, just let you be the secretary filling in the form and asking those routine questions without really getting into the meat of the matter, right? Without showing and demonstrating expertise, then you hurt that relationship no matter how it goes forward, because they're in control. They're railroading, they're setting the boundaries, not you. So by proactively asking questions, you steer that ship. Now, from the Clio Legal Trends report, we see 61% of potential clients didn't get enough information around the who, what, why, when, how of working with a lawyer, because most people haven't before, and cited specifically the lack of information as the sole reason for not hiring the firm. So if they don't get information proactively, which Allison is talking about, whether you're asking questions that you know you need the answers to and demonstrating expertise that way, or sharing and setting expectations by anticipating their questions because they might not know even what to ask, then you set yourself up for closing them if they are a client that you want to close. Now, couple that with 33% of, and I'm still citing the Clio report, 33% of potential clients feel a sense of urgency to hire an attorney. Only 15% of attorneys report sensing clients' urgency to hire an attorney. So what does that mean? That means that attorneys are, as a group, not aligned in understanding the sense of urgency that's coming through. And that is a point of leverage if you're going to ask for something, because you know that those coming to you are in need within a certain time frame. Even if they have more runway than they think they do, their sense of urgency is real enough to them that it motivates action along the lines of your parameters that you set, which may be payment.
Yeah. So Maddy, I dropped a little snarky into the comment section and saying that you were calling us obtuse when we are missing.
It's a Clio report. I'm just the messenger. That might not be you, but that is a lot of your colleagues. And if it is, that's a leverage point for you to be different.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I think it is most of us, and I say us. I include myself in the process, right? Because human beings are all self-motivated. And I want everybody to hear that, because I think we think of ourselves as being in a helping profession. We want to do something for other people, but everything you do, whether it is volunteering to hand out food on Thanksgiving, or it is volunteering to work for free, you are doing that for yourself. You are not doing that for someone else. You're calling it doing that for somebody else, but you get something out of it. It's more valuable to you to feel like the good person, to feel like you're being altruistic, to feel like you are giving away your services to someone who may not be able to afford, which is almost always bullshit, but nevertheless, that person who says, I can't, you're doing something for them, but you are getting something out of it. In fact, we know that there are some clients that they say, hey, can you call me on a Saturday morning? You say, absolutely. Other people, you're like, absolutely not. Because you have a relationship with one that is different than a relationship with the other. So we have to understand how humans are made and recognize that when you're in the consult, if you're not picking up on that urgency point, that is not necessarily because when I say we're obtuse, I'm being somewhat tongue in cheek, but we really are in our own heads. We're focused on what questions do I need to ask to get this person to yes. And a lot of times we are so focused on selling, we're trying to convince the person rather than trying to get rather than walking the person through a process where ultimately that urgency is felt on its own. Then you have a disconnect. And I know that the Clio Trends report says that the public is saying about a third of the time, based on the number of people that made the report, that they feel urgency. I would have to disagree with that. I think people will tell you a certain thing, right? Because they also have a motivation in how they present themselves. A lot of people don't want to be thought of when they're answering these kind of surveys as being prey to attorneys. So they will often say something that fits with their self-image that they want to hold, not necessarily what they actually feel. If someone stopped their life, called a stranger, got information online, made an appointment, came to your office or came to a Zoom meeting, depending on what it is, given the times that we're in, and then shared intimate information about something that they're accused of doing or something that they want to do or something that they're trying to protect themselves from doing, they have an urgency. That urgency may not be felt as palpably as you would feel like somebody who says, I got a call from the prosecutor's office, I've got to turn myself in tomorrow, right? That's a very palpably, understandably urgent thing. Maybe the person is calling and saying, my grandma just died and I'm concerned about what's going to happen if, God forbid, I died without a will, but I'm not planning to die anytime soon. Maybe I'm in my 40s, right? So it might not be a thought that there's true urgency, but you have to understand that urgency isn't necessarily urgent like the building's on fire. It's urgency as in what is going to move this person to take some action to move from where they are to where you want them to be. That's all it is, right?
100%.
Allison, so I want to pipe up here. I want to, and this may be a first for me in just about any public legal forum. I'm going to try to defend my my obtuse lawyer brothers and sisters here. Like I totally hear what you're saying, but let's, or I'd like you to talk, or we can talk a little bit, because I feel like I've been engaging in some more sales activity recently, and I've found it's really sort of exercising a different part of my brain, a new part of my brain. Like, because I've been in these situations where I've got, let's take, a consult in front of me, or a prospective client in front of me. And simultaneously, that power, that desire to want to help is so strong. And yet, like, I feel like I've got to sort of run a different type of process to start thinking about how to move this person to a place where, frankly, I can help them for money, which is like the reason that we all like need to do this, to your point, right? If we sort of get over this notion of like, at the end of the day, altruism is at least partially, if not mostly, about us. That's for a different philosophical podcast or webinar or whatever. But like, I think a lot of attorneys on the, on this webinar and more broadly would like to be able to be more effective at getting these consults to pay. But I think, again, like there's like this real push pull of like, I need to know how much to help, but I also need to know how much to sort of help them to help me, or vice versa. So can you talk about, and I think one of the things we can talk about maybe as we go forward is, part of this is about building a system. Mm-hmm. But I think another is like kind of, figuring out kind of how to run that process in your head. Do you think you can speak to that a little bit? Or Maddy, looks like you've got some thoughts.
Yeah. Allison, I think this is the perfect time to talk about testing.
Okay. So Dan, I love that you're raising this issue about, how do you overcome yourself? Which is really saying, right? I have the urgency to just spit out the answer.
Totally. And I want to be helpful, right?
Over to right. And by the way, when I said that, being selfish is about us, or helping is about us, it's also about the other person, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like altruism goes away because we also get something out of it. So I don't mean to suggest that we don't want to help. Most lawyers I know are inherently in their profession because they want to help people. But when you think about like, how do I choose in this moment not to, spit out a number or tell the person this is, because this is what we try to do. We try to put ice on the fire of the person. So the person calls us and they're urgent. They're like, oh my God, I'm about to get, my house is going to go into foreclosure. You've got to help me, blah, 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 blah. And then you say, oh, don't worry about that. There's the statute that says this, there's this moratorium, and because you want to help the person feel better. Okay. The problem is you have to suspend your internal emotional desire to get the person to feel good about you in the moment, which is what you're doing, right? Because as soon as you give the answer, you get to be the savior. They get to look up to you. They get to think that you are the best person in the world. You get to have that psychological satisfaction of helping in that moment. You have to put yourself on the back burner. You are doing something truly altruistic by pausing and saying, how best can I help this person? The best way to help this person is not to give them the ice to the fire that they have right now, but to get them to the place where they can ultimately put the fire out forever. Because right now they're bleeding, right? I put a Band-Aid on them, I send them home, then they bleed out in their sleep when they get home. As opposed to, I don't put the Band-Aid on right now, I let them bleed a little bit because that's the state that they're in. I didn't cause that. I'm not exploiting it. It exists. I take that person, I guide them over to the emergency room. That's where I can perform my surgery. You have to think about it that way. And for most of us, that is going to include excising ourselves from the process where that pain is first going to hit. So for intake, I always tell people the first thing that you have to do is think about intake as a conveyor belt. They come to your office, they have a communication with whomever's answering the phones, whether it's Smith.ai or a receptionist or a legal assistant, whomever it is. That's the first point of contact. Then you go over to intake. Intake is where we ultimately solve the problem of getting you into the office for a consultation. And then you have your consultation where sales is going to happen, and you're going to move the person from intake over to sales through the sales process and then turn them over to the legal department. And you have those 4 parts of your sales system, whether you have one human being that's in all 4 of those roles, or you have 4 distinct human beings in those roles. You have to think about that in terms of what your structure is. Now, once you have your structure, you have to try and test different things. So for people that say things like, Laura French asked a question in the Q&A that I thought was a brilliant question that I want to actually specifically address, which is, before COVID, I had a great conversion rate, like 90%. And I believe paid consults are a good thing, but I'm hesitant because, I don't want to lose that opportunity because of where we are in the world right now. And so what I would say to Laura and what I would say to any person is that the testing and tweaking of your system is something that is going to iterate, and there will be changes to your system. So in other words, I just literally this morning was talking about systems, and we just started the process. I'll be talking about it all week. But the system of intake, just like every other system, you don't create it and set it and forget it. Your system has to serve the needs of your business as it is right now. So you have to take certain basic knowledge that you understand about people, about psychology, about science, about sales, about the way that behavior happens relative to your industry. And you make a system based on the hypotheses of what's likely to happen in the best case scenario. Then when you're not in the best case scenario, you iterate. So for instance, last year, a lot of people had economic retraction in their area. What did they do? Well, the person that says, I charge a $700 consult fee, and that's what I do, and I don't change from it, that may be fine. In fact, some people may still look at that firm and say, well, that's an exceptional firm. They have exceptionally high prices because they are an exceptional quality, and that a lot of people do have that belief, right? People will think more of Bergdorf Goodman than Kmart just by virtue of the name, regardless of what you buy within the store. But that firm may be losing business because there may be somebody who would buy at 500 or 300 who could still be a good client, but would not buy at 700. So the firms that iterated and said, we charge 700 for a consult fee. We're now going to charge 200. We're going to charge 300. We're going to charge 500. Or we're going to do the kind of the non-fee fee, which is we're going to charge a consult fee, but we're going to waive it if you hire us. Or, if you hire us within, 5 days of coming in for a consultation, that fee is going to be waived. Or a show-up fee, i.e. we'll charge a fee, but it is only to ensure that you show up for the appointment because you're taking time from someone else. You no-show, the fee is ours. You show up, the fee either becomes credited to your retainer, or if you don't hire us, we give you the feedback at the end of your consultation, so that you can deal with the psychology of people saying, I want to get this free, right? So they feel like they're just giving you the money to hold until they show up and get it back. And then when they have a powerful sales conversation at your office, they ultimately will hire you and you'll get to keep that fee anyway. So you do have to make adjustments and try and test your systems the way that they are now to fit what you're going to do in the future.
So Allison, I think that strategy that you mentioned as the show up fee is also very interesting because you already have them engaging in the behavior that you want to continue if they're a good fit for the law firm. So it's less likely that someone is going to say, I paid that show up fee, I had the consultation, no, I think I'm going to go back to the drawing board. I want to have more consultations. I'm going to go through the hassle of, paying that or trying to get my money back or putting this on hold, put a pin in it. Maybe I'm going to get a refund or not. I really feel like doing more work here and spending more time trying to find an attorney, said nobody ever, right? Like very, very rarely does that happen. You already are invested by the nature of that process. So that's also, from a psychological standpoint, very powerful. You have the buy-in literally before you get on the phone, and unwinding it is something that is far less likely for that person to want to do. So I think that's by far the most sophisticated model that you normally would come across with paid consultations. So if it can work for you, and maybe it works for a variety of practice areas, that's one that's pretty compelling. It is a little more complex, but you get a lot of those behaviors ingrained.
Yeah. So I just want to, Dan, before we,
go ahead.
I just want to answer a couple of the questions that are in the chat.
Yeah, Monique had one that I thought was very good around a lower fee.
Yeah, so John is asking to review the issue of waiver, or the examples I gave about waiver. So there's a few different examples. I just want to state this for everyone that's on the webinar and that's going to hear it later. So first, you can charge what's known as a show up fee. right? Where the person is told you're going to pay a consultation fee. However, it is waived when you show up for the appointment. Okay, that is to induce the person to come into your office. Now, of course, I know that we're doing things by Zoom now. We're oftentimes doing things by phone. In-person consultations still are statistically the most likely, based on all data that we have on sales, to get you the highest conversion rate, assuming that you are truly having a sales process. So you tell the person, we pay you pay a fee, you come in. If you don't hire us, you get the fee back. Okay, so the whole idea is that you want them to commit to the process. You want them to commit with their dollars to say, this is important enough that I know I'm taking time from you. I'm going to honor your time. And in exchange for that, I'm going to, if I decide no, after the consultation, I get my money back. So that's one. The second is that you can charge a disappearing fee, right? So the fee starts as a consultation fee, but it ultimately is credited against the retainer fee if the person hires you. So let's say you charge $300 as your consultation fee, you charge a $3,000 retainer fee. When that person comes in and ultimately gets to yes, you can either say, I'm going to charge you the balance of the $2,700, you don't pay the extra $300, or you pay $3,000, but I'm going to give you an hour free when you start the process. Let's say $300 is your hourly rate. So that would be the way that you're doing that. And there are different psychological cues that will tail off of that. The whole idea, though, is to give the person the feeling of free, because sometimes it really isn't that a person doesn't have the money or doesn't want to spend it. Is that it's oftentimes that the person doesn't want to feel bad about themselves if they made the wrong choice. So they have a lot of resistance around, I don't want to hire the wrong attorney because I've had a negative experience with an attorney in the past, or because people have told me attorneys are blah, blah, blah. And so they want to feel like they are not giving money until they have truly decided you're the one. If that is in fact their belief system, you can give them that feeling while still honoring ultimately not giving them a free consultation. The other question that came up in the chat was that if within 10 to 15 minutes of a paid consult, they discover and we as a forum, it is not a good fit. So the reality is there should be things built into your intake process that tell you about a person before you get to the actual consultation process. Part of that is your basic information, right? Who is the person? What is their problem? How are they approaching the problem? But there are also some things that you can look for, like what is the attitude with the staff? How do they approach the problem? You can do kind of litmus test questions like on a scale from 1 to 4, how important are the following things? You know, this attitude, this behavior, this goal, etc. If you still ultimately find that the person is a poor fit, you can always refund the person's money and say, you know, this is just, I have the sense that you would do better. You'd be better served working with someone else.
Yeah, that was going to.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
No, I was just going to say that was going to be my question, Allison. Is should you take the consult from anyone who will pay? And it sounds like there should at least be some kind of qualifying process that you're going through as you're sort of bringing someone in. That even if they're not a good fit, once you get them seated in front of you or connecting with you virtually, you even could potentially send someone out of the intake process if you can tell already up front that they're not a good fit.
Yeah, well, I guess that also depends on a little bit of what Maddy said earlier, which is the growth cycle of your law firm, right?
Right.
Because
Good point.
I will be very candid. When I was growing my law firm aggressively, I represented people that I didn't like. I represented people that I would have chosen if I was just going with ideal. Because to me, it was more important to get the dollars and move on to the next thing so that I could achieve my goals for growth. Now, I ultimately would never take someone if I felt there was a problem with how they treated my staff, or if I thought there was, if I thought the person had, in family law is what I practice. If I thought the person had a motive that would harm a child, I wouldn't say I'll just look past that. But you don't always get to have exactly what you want, when you want it, how you want it from moment one, if your primary goal is growth. Because in the process of growing, you're going to encounter employees that aren't your best, clients that aren't your best. It is a process of growing. So you're going to grow in your knowledge, your skill, your understanding, exceptions of what it is that you want to create. But at some point you can say, here's my breaking point on a scale from 1 to 10. If you're not at least a 7 with my liking of you or my tolerance of you or my desire to work with you, I ethically can't do that. So that's the cutoff point. But everybody's not going to be a 10, right? There's some people you love, and there's some people that you like, and there's some people that you're neutral toward.
Right.
Yeah, so I just want to step into that for a second, because there are, Dan, a lot of questions that you could ask up front that we ask, on the front lines every day in calls and chats. For example, is it the right practice area? Are you determining that they're contacting your firm? If you have, online scheduling with instant, payment on your website, for example, or through an AI chatbot where there's not a live human, then you definitely want to ask the right questions up front to determine, do they represent the areas that you cover at your law firm? And then, are you capturing the information that you need to do that next qualifying stage before the consultation ideally takes place? Maybe after, if it's a live transferred call, in the moment, sort of accepting that payment and the person is available to do the consult. But you might want to ask other things, like Justy Nickel, criminal defense attorney in Colorado, is going to ask, do you have a court date scheduled? If so, when is it? If it's tomorrow morning, is she going to be able to be there? She's got a lot of automated workflow. So actually, in her particular case, she actually can be in a lot of situations, but many can't. So there are qualifying questions that you're going to ask up front. Maybe, how many attorneys have you talked to, if any, before contacting our firm? Oh, 3. Sorry. Right. So there are questions that you will need to determine. What do you need to get beyond just basic contact information that will set you in the right direction? There are other things that will happen afterwards, like conflict checks. Did you look into the case and it's not actually something that you're comfortable or you feel is within the ethical boundaries of where you will work? Or it's just not a case that your firm takes for whatever other reason. You can always say, I'm sorry, we won't be able to move forward. And it's up to you and how you frame your agreement and your terms up front. What was that fee taken for, right? Are you making it explicitly clear that that fee, whether or not you proceed, and it's up to you as the attorney to make that determination, that fee was taken for that time used. If you choose to give it back, you can, and go outside of your policies, but you can't write new policies after you've taken the money.
So I want to, before we move on from the pricing point, I want to ask just sort of one more question to Allison. So like, we build this process to sort of handle this kind of hopefully massive or at least meaningful intake flow. Should firms be looking at these kind of this revenue for paid consultations as a profit center? Like, as they think about optimizing that cost, is this something they should be like trying to make money on, or is it really a marketing expense? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah,
I think about it like an opportunity cost, but I'll let Allison.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with Maddy. I was going to say I would never ever advise somebody to think about it as a profit center.
Okay, this is all a cost of marketing, just potentially cutting down your costs to bring these folks in.
Well, so it's interesting when you call it a cost of marketing, because it could be a marketing cost, it could be an operations cost, right?
Oh, sure.
It's opportunity cost on charging a client that you already have when you're charging a consult. And for most people, not universally, but most people I hear charge a fee for the consult. They don't charge by the hour. So if I charge $350 an hour, I don't charge $350 an hour for the consult, even though some people do. Some people just cut it off at an hour, even if you're spending an hour and 15 minutes between reviewing the intake notes, having the consultation, following up with the person if they don't close. So you have to think about it as it's an investment in the business. But I do tell people, and I advise my clients on this, and we talk about this a lot in Law Firm Mentor, which is you have to know the metrics of your intake system the same way you have to know the metrics of anything else in your business. So one of those numbers is, what is the cost to actually transact to get the person into the office as a client relative to the cost of actually having the work done. So we went through a very detailed analysis when I decided to move from having an attorney to having a non-attorney be the person to sell legal services in my office. And I remember I'm the only owner of my law firm, so I didn't really have to consult anybody. But at the time I did want to bring other people into the fold. So I actually talked to a couple of my more senior attorneys at the time. And the first thought was, oh my God, people are never going to hire from a salesperson. Well, we have a multi-million-dollar law firm, people hire from the salesperson. But, once we kind of got past that, that's not going to happen, that fear, then the next thing was, what is the cost to do it the traditional way versus the cost to do it with a salesperson? So I had to factor in, what is the likely conversion rate of an attorney, and how many hours are they not billing during the time that they're billing a consult, right? So if you think about it this way, an attorney who bills at $300 an hour and meets with 2 people a week, and it takes on average 2 hours per person, that's 4 hours at $300 an hour, that's $1,200. So then I hire a salesperson. If that salesperson has a cost for the firm that is less than $1,200, we're at a point of breaking even, or we're going to be essentially a little bit more profitable with the salesperson. That's assuming that the conversion rates are equal, and almost universally, lawyers are not salespeople. So if you hire a good salesperson, you're going to get a higher conversion rate. You're going to have more people returning off of that $1,200 investment versus when you have lawyers doing it. So again, all of that is about the metrics of how you structure your system. And you have to know those metrics in order to make a wise decision instead of a fear-based decision, even though it's understandable for a lot of people having not done this before. Like, how do you get there? And instead of making a decision that's based on gut, because a lot of people will say, oh, if I can get somebody to call my office, I have a 99% conversion rate. And then I've never found a lawyer that estimates that number accurately, like never. The ego wants it to be like 99%, and then you like get into the numbers and it's more like 70, it could be 60, and it's based on warm traffic, not based on all traffic. So there's lots of different, numbers that kind of float around our heads, but you have to know those numbers very intimately.
So I just want to address a few questions, and then I want to make sure that we have time for Dan to talk about actually implementing payments as part of the intake and consultation process, which he's very well equipped to do. Just a couple questions though before we move on to that. So one question that came in is how do you use a lead intake person, and how is it different from using a virtual receptionist? That's a great question. So a virtual receptionist is going to be your front line. They're going to be on your calls, on your chat, answering texts, answering Facebook messages, right? So that is the initial screening, greeting, transfer point. You're collecting, you're asking, do you have that court date scheduled for tomorrow morning? What is your information? Are you in the right metro area, et cetera, to do that pre-screening qualification. The intake is actually the much more in-depth process. You can imagine if you are doing medical malpractice, there is a boatload of intake. If you're doing personal injury, there is a lot of intake and data collection that goes beyond the first 3 to 5 minute phone call. So, or website chat, which are often 3 times longer than a call. So you can get through a lot of information, but the intake is going to be a highly specialized process that is clearly in the sales funnel at that point, or determining whether or not it's going to move forward with more data, with a goal in mind of determining, is that person going down path A or path B for referrals or not moving forward, sort of denial. It's really important that you don't put more responsibility on that front line than they can handle, because that's what leads to disappointment. That's a more of a judgment role, guided by the system that you set up. And people who are doing that triage work are not the right people to do that more in-depth judgment and steering. Allison, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think we have covered this pretty thoroughly. I'm answering a question in the Q&A, but it's such a good question. I think it really would benefit everyone to hear it, which is, does the salesperson meet with the prospect after the lawyer has done the initial consult? If not, when do they come into play? And the way that I have structured it in my office, and the way that I advise my lawyers who are choosing to do that, my lawyer clients who are choosing to do that, is to structure it in a way that you don't see a lawyer until you pay. Just like when you go into a doctor's office, you don't see the doctor until that copay has been collected, right? It's not like I come, I get my service, and then, oops, I'm sorry, I don't have my credit card with me, or oops, I don't have Sorry, my insurance card didn't go through. Like, you get pre-approved for insurance before you have a medical procedure. Before you have a legal procedure with someone in my office, you have paid for that procedure. So you have already committed with your retainer fee. We already have your signed retainer agreement, etc. Because the salesperson is designed to save the time and money of the lawyer who would otherwise have to consult with a person who comes in as a prospect. And it, by the way, is all about packaging. It's about conveying value. And what we ultimately do is we talk about our director of client services. That's the title that she has. We have that person there in order to do several things. One, to determine that we have a solution for the problem that you have, right? She doesn't give legal advice, but she can certainly issue spots. She can identify who is the right person to ultimately be able to help this person, right? Based on experience, knowledge, personality, all those sorts of things. So it feels like more of a customized concierge relationship, i.e., we're not just handing you over to an attorney and letting you pay for a question mark. We're coming in and having a process whereby we determine if we want to work with you, and if so, who is the person that is best suited to work with you. And notice I said, if we want to work with you. So you want to convey to the public that, you're not Burger King. They can't come in and have you their way. You are a professional. You have a certain level of skill, knowledge, experience, etc., that is of value to the marketplace. And you're not waiting around for anybody to come and just write a check to you. You are somebody who decides whether or not you believe in the righteous cause of the action asserted by the client in order to bring that person into the fold. And when you do that, by the way, you have a better relationship with the client because they value you coming in. The person is not paying simply because they can. They're paying because you have said, I can help you affirmatively. You believe in the client. So the client comes in with a certain level of, I have won over this person of high status. It creates a balanced relationship whereby the attorney is the leader, right? The attorney is not better than, but the attorney is the leader in that situation and is ultimately leading the client to the right result.
Right. So, I mean, again and again, setting boundaries and expectations is critical. Also, when you're taking payment, and we'll move on to Dan to talk about that, when you're taking payment, you're making it very clear that this is not starting, an agreement for you to be the attorney, right? So you have to be clear, what is that payment for, and set guardrails around that. We even recommend at the initial conversation, like if someone engages in a website chat on your website, it's important to even say that conversation doesn't represent an attorney-client relationship. It's not legal advice. A lot of potential clients think that they're in touch with a law firm that's governed by, now I'm getting legal advice. The more upfront you are, the more that you write your policies in fifth grader English, the better, right? Be extremely clear and overthink all of those things. So let's move on to Dan. Thanks for your patience, Dan.
No problem.
And so many great questions for Allison. I'm really glad that you brought all those things up. I want to talk about now, for our last 10 minutes, how in the world do we actually get clients to pay? I mean, we know that credit cards and online payments are here to stay, and you're definitely leaving money on the table if you're not taking online payments. But how is Gravity legal, and how do you, as someone with deep industry expertise, see the future for payments, and how do we make these paid consultations happen with the least friction possible?
Absolutely. And I actually, Daryl just sort of put this on a platter, ask, how would you best handle accepting payment when there is no physical virtual assistant? And the answer is, you can do it electronically, Daryl. That's the magic of this process. I want to just kind of frame what we've had, and I know we've just got a few minutes left, so I'll try to kind of tie some of these threads together. But I think what you've heard us iterate over and over is that, and if you haven't heard us, let me say this explicitly, and I mentioned it earlier, you need to build a system for this. This is not like something that you will probably likely be able to handle yourself. Maybe as you're growing and you're the only one there, you need to, like Allison was saying, you need to think about these different buckets, but this is a system. And if this system works well, obviously you'll be bringing business in, but it should also flow fairly seamlessly. And that should include kind of one of the most important, but also one of the most mundane pieces of this, which is actually getting the money from the prospective client to pay for this initial consultation. And so let me just throw a couple of different ideas at you to sort of help you think through this. Obviously, one thing you can do is use a scheduling technology. And again, we can talk in another webinar about how you can integrate something like Smith.ai or Acuity or Calendly or other technologies. HubSpot has some of this technology into this process. But one thing you can do, and we do this, but other payment processors do it as well, is drop what we call just a standing link into one of these intake kind of workflows, if you will. So this is just a link that charges the same amount every time. Let's call it $250 for ease and convenience. And the client gets sent that link and they just pay $250. That's your initial consult link. If you want to get more sophisticated, another way is to actually sort of look at a deeper integration. I'm going to drop this into the chat right now. So excited to announce that Smith.ai and Gravity Legal are working on an integration. You can get the details at the link I just dropped into the chat. But this will help automate this process even further, both facilitating the Smith.ai folks to take payment for your consultations, but also automating it and allowing it to be handled in chat if you want to do it that way. There's a ton of different ways that you can do this, but again, Daryl, you couldn't have sort of teed it up better. Like that, you absolutely need a system to be handling this. B, if you can do it electronically, it's a lot easier instead of trying to take checks or cash at the time of payment. And C, especially in a time of COVID where a lot of these, you may never even meet with the person kind of face to face. Facilitating this payment through some kind of electronic means is going to make your life a lot easier. Just as a teaser, I also did a little bit of research about how lawyers where this money should go, whether it should go into your trust account or your operating account. That's a whole nother probably days worth of content, or at least if not a half day. But in the resource center materials that we'll be sending out at the end of the day with the link to this recording, I'll drop some of the ethics opinions that I found into that so that you folks can read up. The short version is it's really going to depend both on what the nature of the consult is. Is it more of kind of like a legal information or just a meeting, or are you actually planning on giving them advice? And then also where you're located. Some states allow you to take earned upon receipt retainers, some don't. Some you'll have to take the payment kind of, potentially real time. Again, there's a lot of nuances around this, but I'll drop some of that into the materials so that you can read them later.
Awesome. Dan, thank you so much. There's a lot of questions, as to be expected, around, Allison recommending sales professionals rather than you or your repurposed, sort of long-suffering paralegal to be on sales calls where they're super uncomfortable, but they want to impress their boss. There's too much to get into. We've got 5 minutes left, but I think the moral of the story is, and maybe the soul searching to do now is, what is the point of that conversation for that intake specialist? For if you have multiple attorneys at your firm, also think about who is the best person to handle those consultations. Maybe it's not every single attorney who is carrying on consultations. It's only a select few who are really great at it, or there's one person who's out there, sort of pounding the pavement trying to drive interest, and another is taking those consultations. So some of this just has to do with, what are you naturally talented in doing? What are you interested in doing? Where is your appetite? And then what about the team? So if you think about sales professionals, they have leaned into an industry, an area of work that they are hopefully good at. If not, calling references helps, and trial periods help. Paralegals have not leaned into that. You probably have not leaned into those initial conversations. So when it comes to, would I rather have a sales professional asking an attorney legal questions? How does this work? Is this a qualified lead? Sort of those questions that you get to know and improve upon over time, and they get minimized, versus the paralegal not having time for profitable, billable, high margin work. I would much rather train the person who's already really skilled in that nuanced, challenging field of sales than pull the paralegal off work that I'm going to make money on as an attorney, and am not an attorney, and have them focus their time on what they are best suited to and most enjoy doing for their long-term retention and happiness. So in this conversation, it's not just how do I prevent the people asking me questions, but also how do I keep my team doing what they are best at doing and they love to do and where their career path is growing. Because as business owners, you have to think about your team and taking good care of them, because those you take good care of will take care of you. So it has a lot more to do than just, am I picking a salesperson or a paralegal to be in that role?
Yeah. So Maddy, I just there are a lot of questions that came up. I did not know I was opening Pandora's box with, with referencing a sales professional, but there are a lot of questions about that. And I wanted to just kind of bring this all full circle. Since we're talking about paid consultations, that naturally implicates both the intake process and the sales process at the point of consultation. So I have some free resources for everyone. And I know that Dan is going to be putting this into a resource that we're going to be sending out to everybody, but I just want to let you guys know what they are as we go through this process. So first, for those of you that want to optimize your intake process, I'm a big proponent of using services like Smith.ai if you are a smaller shop, if you have fewer leads, especially because you can ask for what you want. You can oversee that process with someone who is only going to be taking a few calls. Once you get to 100 or more calls a month, I recommend that you actually have an on-site person dedicated to your intake. Whether you do an outsourced person company, or you do an on-site person, you need to have a certain level of communication, a certain amount of training, and there is a big process associated with that. So I'm actually teaching a free webinar on this on Wednesday, March 10th. That's 2 days from today, at 9:00 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And yes, there will be a replay for those of you that are on the West Coast or are just not early folks. So if you sign up for the webinar, the link is in the chat for you there. I also wanted to give you guys a resource to help for those of you that are afraid to charge and not sure what to say when someone says, I don't have the money, or I don't want to pay until I met the attorney and know that I want to hire the attorney. I have created a cheat sheet specifically for dealing with those objections in intake, okay? So the intake objections cheat sheet is a 2-page document. You can download it. The bit.ly is in the chat. Again, it's bit.ly LFM-intake-OBJ for objections. And then finally, all that we have been talking about is sales process. Sales process is different for a professional than if you were to just go out and Google how do you sell, or teach me how to sell. There are some great resources out there. I'm a big fan of Sandler. I'm a big fan of the RAIN Institute, but neither one of those really intersects with being a professional and licensing requirements and the restriction on giving legal advice. So I wanted to cover that in a training for lawyers. It's absolutely free. Again, it is a 5-video training series. So once you opt in for it, you get a video a day over 5 days that teaches you things such as how not to give legal advice, why not to give legal advice, how to have conversations that are about asking questions so that you don't get 5,000 what's my legal remedy, what's my answer, what do you tell me about the law type questions, how to deal with the money talk, and how to deal with objections to money and other objections that will come up in your consultations. So those 3 resources, I put those in the chat earlier. I'm going to, now that someone else has commented, put them in again so that you have them separate and apart from my other comment to Melody. So those resources are available to you, and I know that Dan is going to put those all together.
Yeah, and so what I'll do to buy Dan a little bit of time, I'm going to send the recording, and then I will also send the resources that we provided here. We'll do a follow-up email either from Dan or myself with that full resource list together, but want to get the recording to you and some of these things as soon as possible so you can get to work on them today. Dan, what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you and learn how to bring Gravity Legal into their firms?
Yeah, I dropped it into the chat. Folks can email me at dlear@gravity-legal.com. I actually dropped my schedule right in there, so folks can reach out there, and then you can always book time with us directly from the Gravity Legal homepage at gravity-legal.com.
Awesome. Everyone, thank you so much for spending the last hour with us. And Allison, Dan, you never fail to deliver. Thank you so much for a fantastic conversation, great advice, and just tuning into the conversation that's on everyone's minds these days is how best to utilize their time and energy and money and their teams, and just build a scalable, sustainable law firm that really of their dreams. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone. See you all soon. Take care.